I'm going to show you some insider filmmaking techniques used to make Conclave such an incredible work of art.
If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war. And you have to commit to a side.
When I first started watching Conclave in the theater, I was really impressed with the look and feel of the film. Edward Berger, the director, had total control over every inch of the frame and the story, like a perfectly chiseled statue in the Vatican. People still wonder how craftsmen managed to build St. Peter's Basilica back in the 1600s. But as for the craft that went into Conclave, you don't have to wonder. I'm going to show you how they sculpted the film with precision and purpose.
The throne of the Holy See is vacant.
Speaking of purpose, I was perplexed by the opening shot when I first saw it. The lead role of Thomas Lawrence, portrayed brilliantly by Ralph Fiennes, who was in charge of running the Conclave, was walking in a dark tunnel at night on his way to the Vatican. Why was he there? Why was he walking and not driving? How does this set up the movie? Just a fair warning that major spoilers are ahead. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, I highly recommend that you do. In the ensuing opening shots, it's clear there's a lot of pressure on this man's shoulders. It's also staged in a contemporary luxurious setting. When I think of the Vatican, I think of romanticized history, tons of detailed mosaics, centuries-old messaging, priceless works of art everywhere you look, because that's what it's known for. But here, the walls are bare, two-tone marble, straight lines with very little detail, a brutalist architectural style. The director makes a point to show lots of modern technology and practically zero historical decor. The mechanical thermometer, the plastic body bag secured by polyester belts. Taking out the dead pope almost felt sterile. The mechanical window shades, a pile of digital phones, X-rays, iPhones, and iPads. The automatic espresso machine, a vape pen. Look at the glassware they drank with. Not exactly the holy cliches portrayed in lots of other movies like Indiana Jones. The director clearly wanted a modern feel to craft a message. He also decided to shoot most of the shots leading up to and inside the conclave with an exquisite, intimate feel. He uses a combination of low depth of field, meaning only parts of the frame are in focus. They use spotlighting to only light up parts of the frame, tight camera shots, luxurious materials and surfaces, and very stylized color grading. This shot here is the perfect example. So here you can see there's certain areas that they went out of their way to darken even more and just kind of black out, creating a lot of negative space, which invokes secrecy and exclusivity, and also helps direct your eye to parts of the frame that they want. The surfaces include beautiful, bold marble walls, well-lit glass art, reflective table surfaces, and fluffy velvet and silky garments that the cardinals wore. And if you look at the red zucchettos and any other red objects or fabrics in these shots, they were highlighted by boosting the vibrancy of the color, known as saturation. But if they applied that same saturation to people's skin, they would all look like glowing demons. So certain colors and parts of the frame are treated differently than other parts. And that heightened realism is why it feels so luxurious, like a modern painting, because it's not real. It's not what our eyes are used to seeing. Each of these scenes that follow this formula are like works of modern art. All of that added darkness and low depth of field creates this intimate, private, exclusive, claustrophobic effect that is happening to all of these characters. Exclusivity from the general public, but also the women in particular. Look at this shot of Cardinal Lawrence writing something. All of the writing is blurred out and it's dark all around him. What's actually going on in their mind is private for dramatic effect. And they portray the frame in such a way that we feel that privacy around them. The cardinals have a choice to make about whether to keep moving the church forward or to vote for a cardinal who wants to bring it back in time to old, outdated traditions.
Senza Roma, senza la tradizione di Roma, things fall apart.
And it's pretty clear what the director wants. The way he designs and shoots the film makes the old-fashioned way seem like the wrong way. He wants us to feel a modern way forward for the church. Even when they're in the Sistine Chapel, which has some of the world's most famous works of art, we barely see any of it. I did find it interesting that when we first see the chapel before the conclave starts, it is fully lit. And the shot begins with these construction workers in that upper window trying to protect a vulnerable church, which is also what the conclave is doing. And it also acts as a foreshadowing for the explosion later on. But once the conclave does start and they're in the chapel voting, it's super dark with just a spotlight effect on the cardinals. Yet there's no beautiful lamps. So where is the light coming from? You can tell by the shadows in this frame that the lights are in fact coming from above them, which maybe could look in reality something like this, and just digitally removed out of the camera shot so it looks completely dark. It doesn't make sense in reality. It's a stylistic choice made to make the event feel dramatic, intimate, and secretive. And you'll notice in some of the cardinal's close-up shots, the main cardinal the director wants us to focus on happens to be the brightest in frame. The row behind happens to be darker, and the cardinals on either side happen to be covered in more shadow. For these shots, they probably added an extra light or added a bounce card that reflects extra light onto the face of the main cardinal, so we immediately know who we're supposed to look at. Look, you can see here how the main cardinal in frame is in a spotlight, and as the camera dollies or moves from one cardinal to the next, the spotlight moves with the camera. So right here, you can see the cardinal is still in shadow, and as the camera moves to center him in frame, so comes the light. It helps us to focus our attention on where it's meant to be. It's a colder environment without the lamps, because now, in this room, it's a war for the future of the church. And then notice in contrast, after Cardinal Lawrence uncovers a dirty secret of Cardinal Tremblay, he reveals this information in the cafeteria, a fully lit, bright room. Even the women are there to hear it.
It would never have seen the light of day if you had not broken into the Holy Father's apartment to remove it.
But it did see, literally, the light of day. And it's the same thing when Cardinal Adeyemi's dirty secret is aired out with Cardinal Lawrence. It's one of the only scenes in their private quarters with actual daylight streaming through the window.
To this day, he has no idea who his father is, if indeed it is me. That is the child. We were very young.
No, Joshua. She was very young. She was 19 years old. You were 30.
Thomas.
Each scene in Conclave has what I like to call a story within the story. What we have seen so far is a hint of Berger's secret sauce, a cohesive language that works like clockwork. Dark versus light, secrecy versus transparency. The dark scenes tend to have men only in them, and the women are generally only shown in scenes with daylight. This was in part due to the circumstances of the conclave itself. But I do find the stark contrast between the way the men and the women interacted with each other throughout the film to paint a powerful message. I mean, look at this shot, for example. It's beautifully choreographed. These women are on a mission full of purpose amongst the old stagnant men. Total symbolism for the message of the film. So now the story within the story becomes clear. To me, this is the whole movie summed up right here. Which now brings me back to that opening shot. Remember when the dead pope was being wheeled out awkwardly before the opening title? The lights he was passing by made it almost seem like he was in that tunnel. And to me now it's becoming more clear what that tunnel was setting up. Dark and alone in this lead role, Cardinal Lawrence is facing the headwinds against this modern culture. He has to overcome the dark and secretive forces within the conclave that want to bring the church backwards to the detriment of women around the world, and instead modernize the church in a way that aligns it with the evolving role that women play.
I believe women should play more of a role in the curia.
Let's not mention women.
Why?
He doesn't just have the weight of the conclave on his shoulders. He has the weight of the future of billions of people. And you can see him battling through all the politics, attacks, cynics, the turmoil.
Who fights these animals?
Often without even having to say a word. All that weight and pressure he faces is often just conveyed with a look on his face over and over again, with piercing eyes so focused you can look right into his soul. Or at times you don't even see his eyes, and there's still a universe of intense drama and emotion. I was talking to Edward Berger, the director, yes, the man himself, and he was telling me that the biggest surprise to him during the shoot was the power of Fiennes' face. You can feel the pressure he's constantly under, but you can also feel that he has the strength and wisdom to make the right choices to guide centuries of precedent into a new era.
Let us pray that God will grant us a pope who doubts. And let him grant us a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness and who carries on.
Ralph Fiennes' character embodies the Catholic Church itself, and he does it masterfully, often with just his presence.
You are steering this conclave. Exactly where, I do not know. But that firm hand of yours has its admirers.
Very few people can do what Fiennes did in this movie. And in the end, which I won't totally spoil, they do choose a modern way forward. It's a new era for the church, one that is more inclusive of women in higher roles. You can see the obvious symbolism here of Cardinal Lawrence taking an ancient animal inhabiting the church and putting it back in its place. There are now beautiful, open, light, wide shots, and the final shot of the film is meant to give women their moment. It's a poetic story that starts in a dark and turbulent place and ends in lightness. Finally, I will say, I asked Berger about how he came up with that opening shot, and he said that he was passing through the tunnel on his way to the Vatican, and he thought to himself, this is a place where Cardinal Lawrence would be. So it was the director's way of establishing his lead character, perhaps as a gritty, blue-collar guy. But it was also the story of the film, a dark, enclosed space with only God watching, represented by those overhead lights. Look, they had the same overhead lighting effects just like inside the Sistine Chapel when they were voting. And those lights were surrounded by the vast darkness of doubt. And I just love how the main character arc and the story work together seamlessly. It's a work of modern art, perfectly chiseled one frame at a time.
La iglesia no es el pasado. La iglesia es lo que hagamos en adelante.
What's next from me is another awesome episode. And if you enjoyed this one, please subscribe to my channel so I can keep making more. Thank you.